Jerry Jacobson took pride in his practical nature and commitment to his work. His job often meant long stretches on the road, overseeing fencing contracts and designing farm structures, which frequently kept him away from home for days. These trips gave him time to think, and he appreciated the change of scenery. Yet they also stirred a lingering unease. He sensed an unsettling doubt about what he might come back to. Though he never voiced his concerns, something felt subtly wrong in his marriage to Shelley, as if an undercurrent of tension was quietly simmering. Over time, Jerry noticed Shelley's behavior changing. Once attentive, she was now distant, her actions increasingly evasive. The tension between them grew after years of unsuccessful attempts to start a family. While Jerry tried to dismiss it as ordinary stress, Shelley's insistence on installing a complicated alarm system struck him as odd, even obsessive. At first, he brushed it off, but a nagging suspicion started to take root in his mind. Sneaking into his own house undetected wasn't hard for Jerry. He just had to circle around back, enter through the basement, and avoid triggering the system Shelley had pressed him to install. Entering from the front wasn't an option. The alarm would go off instantly. Shelley had been adamant about extra security, so much so that Jerry finally gave in and set up the system. The alarm even covered the garage door, a detail Shelley had specifically requested. She insisted on a 10-second delay on the keypad. 45 seconds is ridiculous. A thief could make it to my bedroom before the alarm kicks in, she had argued. You just want to give your boyfriend time to jump out the window, Jerry joked. Shelley just laughed and continued making dinner, but her logic was convincing enough that he reset the delay. Of course, this meant he'd trigger the alarm each time he returned home, but it would only last a few seconds until he entered the 4-digit code. You check it every day to make sure it works, Shelley teased him one afternoon as he walked in, annoyed after disabling it about 24 times. He knew all the windows were secured too, but he also knew no one would notice the wire he ran along the top of the door frame, bypassing the sensor. Shelley rarely ventured to the basement, and even if she did, Jerry doubted she'd see it. When he tested the setup, the panel lit up perfectly and the cables held steady. The door made no noise. The hinges, which he'd oiled, moved smoothly. He'd reinforced each step of the stairs himself nearly a week earlier. Shelley was actually pleased about the stairs. She had been asking him for months to fix their creaky state. He'd tested their strength with his full weight and smiled to himself. No sound at all. His small .22 caliber high-standard pistol, stashed in his windbreaker on hooks at the top of the stairs, held 9 rounds. It felt oddly reassuring to reach into his pocket and feel it right where he left it. Jerry had no intention of using it unless absolutely necessary, but he wasn't going to back down either. Something was off, and he was determined to get to the bottom of it. There was no sense in confronting Shelley. If something was happening, she'd deny it, and if not, he'd look foolish. He was troubled by the 3 years they'd spent trying to conceive without success. He had even seen a doctor who'd humorously assured him he was more than fertile. The doctor had chuckled, slapped Jerry on the shoulder, and urged him to just go home. It was Shelley's turn, yet she'd chosen her own doctor, the one she'd been seeing since before their marriage. She insisted on it. One day, by coincidence, Jerry spotted her leaving the hair salon. She was supposed to be at her doctor's appointment, but instead she was getting her hair and nails done. Jerry didn't think much of it at the time, already late for work, until the thought lingered as he parked in his garage. This was just last month. That evening, she'd told him, looking sorrowful, that while she could potentially have children, it was unlikely. She'd even shed quiet tears. He held her as she calmed down, but a sick feeling settled in his stomach. "We can just keep trying, honey," she murmured, but her tone didn't feel quite right. Not entirely honest. That's when Jerry began paying closer attention. He doubted the hairdresser, a woman who he saw as far removed from medical expertise, was offering Shelley the guidance she needed on such matters. Treason? No way. It couldn't be. Shelley was always at home. Always. No hints, not a single one. Whenever he came back, she was there. Sure, he had to go on overnight trips a few times a month, but that was normal. Could it be pills? He wondered. Was she hiding independence? But that too seemed impossible. She looked healthy, even carrying an extra pound or 2 on her rounded figure. Maybe gambling. She could be playing at Indian casinos, but a quick check of her finances showed nothing unusual. Shelley was generally frugal, aside from clothes, the occasional $50 salon visit, and keeping her nails done. But her nails always looked well kept. This was the part he never quite understood. He'd heard her complain, "Damn, I broke my nail," at least 50 times. Later that night, while Shelley was in the shower, Jerry searched her drawers and looked in her closet. Shelley loved beautiful clothes. She had outfits he'd never seen. One dresser drawer held a little bag of underwear that he couldn't recall her wearing before, but that wasn't unusual. When they went out to dinner or dancing, she would often surprise him with stunning outfits and skimpy underwear. Jerry enjoyed how Shelley would model her looks, delighting in his reactions. She could certainly turn heads, and she knew it. He almost wished it wasn't Saturday night. Dancing with her made him feel proud, and afterward he'd have the pleasure of discovering what she was wearing underneath. Then he found birth control pills. His heart pounded, and he barely composed himself before she finished showering. His first impulse was to confront her, but he reminded himself to look into things more closely. Years earlier, he'd made a mistake with Dana, his then-girlfriend. He had planned to propose, and it seemed she'd been thinking about it too. They'd even met each other's families. But one night at a party, he saw her passionately kiss another man, pressing close to him. Shocked, he watched as she greeted him. Jerry had stormed over and knocked the guy flat. Only then did he learn it was her brother back from college for the weekend. Dana had wanted to surprise him with her brother's visit, which had gone terribly wrong. She didn't answer his calls after that night. Jerry had barely reached second base with Dana, but she'd hinted that things were about to change. That very evening, she'd even slipped a packet of protection into his shirt pocket with a mischievous smile. But his attack on her brother in front of everyone ruined it all. Thinking before acting was a lesson he'd learned well. Jerry's work involved ordering and designing farm fences, sheds, and paddocks. He created pens to help farmers manage their livestock for auctions or medical care. It was a rewarding job, allowing him to meet good people and work outdoors. His last assignment had been particularly rewarding. Not only did he sell nearly 4 miles of fencing, but the family invited him to dinner. Ham and cornbread with black beans, homemade, not from a box. Sam Martin, a rugged old man, was tall and lean, often seen in faded red long johns under his unbuttoned work shirt, held by suspenders. His wife, Dottie, was cheerful and plump, always smiling. By day's end, after riding across the ranch on Honda ATVs, Sam and Jerry had become close. Both shared a love of hunting and fishing, and Sam felt almost like the father figure Jerry had never had. It was remarkable how two men could bond so quickly over a day's conversation, but that's what happened. Sam and Dottie had a daughter, Molly, around 19, and quite attractive. Even in a flannel shirt and jeans, she was undeniably a beautiful young woman. She seemed interested in Jerry, though he was married, so it wouldn't go anywhere. Yet her image lingered in his mind the next day on the drive home. Good people, Jerry thought, the kind you'd want to know better. Their ranch was blessed with hills and good water, and Sam had been raising his herds there for years. But with new neighbors moving in, unhappy with cattle roaming on their lawns, fences had become a necessity. Sam faced a choice: fence his land or let development overrun it. He chose to build. This had been one of Jerry's biggest sales. The downside of Jerry's job was the distance. Many large farms were hundreds of miles from home. For this last trip, he'd gone over 350 miles into Idaho. His company paid for his motels and meals, so rather than driving back the same day, Jerry usually stayed overnight and returned home the following day. This time felt different. Sam and Dottie insisted he stay the night, showing him to the spacious bedroom upstairs. It was so quiet there that Jerry had trouble falling asleep. Now and then, he heard sheep or cows, each sound jolting him awake. Around 2 a.m., he tossed the blanket aside as the warm night settled in. He got up to use the bathroom and, on his way down the hall, passed another bedroom with a partially open door. A soft nightlight glowed inside. Molly lay atop the blanket, undressed. Her lower body was in shadow, but one bare bosom was highlighted in the faint light. She looked to be asleep, and the scene was intensely sensual. Jerry acknowledged her beauty, but quickly looked away. It wasn't right to linger. Returning to his room, he noticed her door was now closed. A flush rose to his face. She must have caught him peeking. The next morning, Sam and Dottie invited him to the kitchen, where heaps of eggs, ham, and potatoes awaited, better than anything he'd ever tasted. "We grow it all ourselves, 16 acres on the North Ridge just for potatoes," Sam said, noticing Jerry's smile as he took a second helping. Molly strolled in then, looking around sleepily and yawning. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt, looking incredible. She gave Jerry a sly glance, raising one eyebrow in a playful way that made him blush. Dottie noticed, glancing between them with a grin. "More coffee, Jerry?" she asked. Jerry nodded, feeling a little out of place, but grateful for the warm hospitality. After breakfast, he packed his things, placing the signed contract and a generous check into his briefcase. It was time to head back to his own life. He thought he could live happily like Sam and Dottie. As he climbed into his truck, Dottie handed him a loaf of homemade cornbread, which he looked forward to eating on the long drive. Molly stood on the porch, holding the railing with one hand. Jerry waved as he started the truck, and she waved back. On the drive home, he couldn't stop thinking about her, trying to push the thought away, but the image of her lying there undressed kept flashing in his mind. Shelley kept their home spotless and was always there to greet him with hugs when he returned. His trips rarely lasted more than a night, and he loved coming home. But oddly, after these trips, Shelley always seemed extra affectionate. At 28, she was in great shape, her blonde hair and a short updo. She was well-built, especially up top, and worked in real estate commission sales. Her work wasn't bad either. Occasionally, she made more than he did, though that was rare, and in recent years, she sometimes went a month or two without sales. Despite this, Jerry knew he could use a new truck. His old Dodge Ram still looked good, but was showing signs of wear. He held off on replacing it, as it was fully paid off. Their bed life was good. He came home a couple of times a week, and Shelley was always thrilled. He felt their life together was solid. Sure, there were some things he'd like to improve, but he made the best of it. His last trip ended like the others, Shelley waiting, ready for love time. Minutes later, they were in bed, the sheets crisp and clean as they always were when he came home. Despite the lingering suspicion in the back of his mind, Jerry managed well. When focused on work, his mind was on numbers and plans, not these suspicions. He had nothing concrete to go on. Maybe Shelley had gone to both the doctor and the salon that day. New clothes, fancy underwear. She could have been planning a surprise for him, as she sometimes did, coming out dressed to impress for a nice dinner, doing a little twirl to show off a new dress or a tiny strip with a grin. But the suspicion wouldn't leave him. He had to find the truth. Birth control pills meant she'd lied to him, and it bothered him that she might not just be avoiding having kids. He made changes to figure things out, adjustments she didn't even notice. The night things unraveled, Jerry drove past his house, scanning for an unfamiliar car. There was none, which he expected, given the nearby neighbors. Upstairs, the light was on, the curtains tightly drawn. He felt a dull ache, holding the pack of birth control pills he'd found in her underwear drawer. Seeing her at the salon instead of the doctor's had been a shock, and that's where all this started. "If you smell a rat, it's close by," his mom had said 100 times. Jerry sensed it at the top of the stairs. He listened, only hearing the shower running. A strange sound at nearly 2 a.m. He'd expected her to be asleep or maybe catch her doing something else. Since he'd told her he was in Idaho, she thought he couldn't be home until late the next day. There was even a good gig in Idaho. He'd arranged a sale over the phone. Sam and Dottie, pleased with his first job, had asked him back for more. Though he was invited, he still had to compete in a small auction for another project nearby. He briefly thought he might enjoy it. Maybe he'd get some more cornbread. And maybe he'd even see Molly again. Jerry shook his head, trying to clear his mind. He wasn't himself, letting strange thoughts slip in. Here he was, standing at the top of his own stairs, tool in hand, thinking about work and a woman he barely knew. Part of him wanted to turn around and slip back out of the house, but he needed to know. If Shelley wasn't doing anything wrong, he could leave unnoticed and forget this ever happened. But what if she was? Jerry didn't know what he'd do if there was someone with her. The thought of an affair twisted in his mind, nagging at him with a sad certainty. He felt foolish as he stood there, listening. All he heard was the shower running. Shelley often took long showers, so that wasn't unusual. Finally, he pushed the door open slightly, not expecting much. A man sat on the edge of the disheveled bed with his back to the door, fully dressed, reading Popular Science, Jerry's magazine. Jerry's vision reddened. The shower was still on. The man turned a page. "Who the hell are you?" Jerry demanded, stepping into the room. The man jolted and looked at Jerry in shock. It was Art Barnes, the local bank manager Shelley worked with on her real estate deals. Art was around 50, gray at the temples, and a big guy, bigger than Jerry. Jerry knew Barnes had his hands in every major deal in town, and suspected he'd put up a tough fight if things turned physical. "Wait, it's not what it looks like," Barnes stammered, then saw the tool in Jerry's hand, his eyes going wide. "You came to my house to be with my wife in my own damn bed?" Jerry growled. "Buddy, it's not—" Barnes didn't get to finish. Jerry lifted the tool, and Barnes threw the magazine aside, lunging at him. The sudden aggression took Jerry by surprise. He'd expected Barnes to back off. Barnes might have reached him before he could fire, but he had to come around the bed. Jerry shot him twice. Barnes fell, groaning. "What's going on?" Shelley's scream cut through the room as she burst from the bathroom, dripping wet and completely undressed. "Who is this? What's he doing here?" Jerry shouted. Her hand flew to her mouth as she looked down at Barnes writhing on the floor. "Jerry, it's not what it seems," she said, looking panicked. "Oh my God! You were getting ready for him!" Jerry shouted, his anger exploding. "No, honey, we were just going to talk, that's all," she whimpered. "At 2 a.m.? In our bed? Undressed? I just wanted a shower. Nothing happened." Her eyes filled with dread. "You lying witch!" he screamed, his fury boiling over. Jerry shot her too. Shelley reacted like a scene out of a movie, screaming as she fell. Jerry watched her for a moment. It all felt surreal, as if he were watching someone else's life unfold on a screen. He turned to Barnes, who lay on the floor, moaning and staring up at him in terror. "Please, don't liquidate me," Barnes begged. For a split second, Jerry considered putting a bullet in his head, but decided against it. "Fool," he muttered, delivering a hard punch to Barnes's face. Barnes went silent. Suddenly, a cold calm settled over Jerry, as if he were outside himself, watching the scene unfold. He approached Shelley, who was crying and writhing. "Was it worth it?" he asked. Shelley just stared at him, her eyes wide with fear. "Forget it," he muttered, then went to the nightstand and picked up the phone. "I found an intruder in my wife's bedroom and shot him. My wife was hurt in the struggle." "Send an ambulance," he said, his tone steady. Then he tucked the tool into his waistband and headed downstairs. In the fridge, he found his usual 6-pack of beer. On the counter sat an unopened bag of chips and a jar of mixed nuts, snacks Shelley knew he liked. Jerry grabbed them and went to the living room, sitting in a spot where he could see the base of the stairs. He thought about the job he'd just won, running the numbers in his head. The tool dug into his side, so he shifted it to a more comfortable spot. Shelley's sobbing drifted down from upstairs, and he reached over to turn on the TV. People were talking, but he couldn't follow what they were saying. The chips were fresh and tasty. By his second beer and halfway through the bag of chips, he finally heard the sirens. They sure aren't in a rush, he thought. On the way to the station, he was annoyed he hadn't been allowed to take his jar of nuts with him. They weren't exactly gentle with him either. They'd seen him sitting with the tool in his belt, so someone immediately pointed a weapon at him, yelling. One officer took the tool while Jerry was munching on a chip, only to be thrown down, arms twisted behind his back. "Ouch, that hurts," he muttered, but nobody replied. "Shut up," one of them growled. When he later asked for his jar of nuts, Jerry clammed up. "It doesn't look good," his new lawyer, Jack Ireland, told him. Jerry didn't know him. He'd never needed a lawyer before. Another inmate had recommended him. Mercer, McLaren, Hansen, Ireland, Phillips, the guy had listed. Jerry figured he'd spent enough time talking to lawyers. "I used Jack Ireland. He's solid," the guy boasted. "Then why are you still here?" Jerry asked, earning only a side eye. But he had to find someone, so he called Ireland. Jack Ireland was a short, stocky man with a battered briefcase. He reviewed the charges and shook his head. "So, what's next?" Jerry asked, glancing nervously at Ireland. Ireland leaned back, folding his arms. "Bail hearing. We'll get it. You've got enough home equity to cover it. After that, we wait for the grand jury to review the case." Jerry hesitated. "How serious is it?" "Attempted homicide," Ireland replied bluntly. He gave Jerry a hard look. "If you're going to shoot, make it count. As long as he's alive, he can testify against you. You're in deep now. And seriously, a .22? Should have gone with a Magnum," he added, a smirk creeping across his face. Jerry's voice wavered. "How bad off are they?" "No one's really told me much," Ireland sighed. "Your wife will be okay. Just a side wound. But Barnes, he's in rough shape. Those .22 rounds tend to fragment. He was in surgery for a while. Why'd you shoot him twice, anyway?" "He was still coming at me." "That second shot looks targeted. You strike below the belt," Ireland said with a side-eye. "Great," Jerry muttered, making the lawyer snicker. "A Magnum would have blown him off, but you just punched a hole between them," he said with another snort. Almost a month later, Jerry was finally out on bail, back in fresh air that felt strangely clean after so long in jail. He'd gotten used to the prison smell. He couldn't go home. The court order kept him 100 meters away from Shelley. She'd been discharged from the hospital long before he'd been freed, but he'd beaten her to signing the paperwork. Their home was titled in both their names, so either could sign off. A small legal detail, but it worked in his favor. He guessed Shelley missed it since she'd been in the hospital. Jack Ireland knew what he was doing and ensured he'd get paid. If Shelley wanted the house, she'd have to take on some of the bills. Jack Ireland had already secured a sizable deposit on his own apartment. Jerry was broke, having used his savings to hire Ireland, and he knew that was just the beginning. He figured this would infuriate Shelley, but he didn't care. His truck was parked down the street around the corner. He figured it was at least 100 meters away, as the order required, though he wasn't sure. A dozen parking tickets were stuck to the windshield, but it hadn't been towed. Jerry grabbed the tickets and tossed them. "What are they gonna do? Arrest me?" he muttered. At work, he checked in with his boss, who seemed on edge, and informed him they no longer needed him since he'd been unavailable, forcing them to hire a replacement. Jerry understood. He'd already seen the newspaper articles. That night, he slept in his truck, parked in a place called South Park. A bit of irony, he thought. The next day, he called Ireland, who arranged for a cop to escort him to pick up some of his things. Maybe Ireland wasn't so bad. Shelley was nowhere around. Jerry packed his clothes, tools, and his 2 Epiphone guitars. He grabbed his fishing gear and all 4 of his coin collections. He considered taking the big screen TV, but realized he had nowhere to plug it in. On his way out, he saw his jar of mixed nuts still on the shelf by the chair. He grinned, grabbing it. Peeking in the fridge, he considered taking the last 5 beers. But the cop gave him a look, so he left them behind. Stepping onto the porch, he discreetly changed the alarm system's access code right in front of the cop, who didn't notice. He chuckled at the small act of defiance. At a local store, he sold 2 guitars and most of his fishing rods, keeping just 1. After that, he had $100 left to his name. He stopped by the post office where he and Shelley rented a mailbox. Unsurprisingly, his key no longer worked. Shelley had changed it. Still, his mail was there. The clerk wasn't supposed to hand it over, there was a sign saying so. But Jerry looked her square in the eye, and she handed it over quickly, clearly uneasy. Inside were credit card offers and one for a funeral plan. Fitting, he thought. He rented a new box and filled out paperwork for the court to have his address. Part of him considered leaving town, but driving a huge yellow Dodge Ram, he knew he wouldn't be hard to find. 2 weeks later, Jerry was still jobless. His unsmiling face had been all over the news, painting him as an irrationally jealous husband who'd stormed into a business meeting and started shooting. He had an idea where this version came from. Art Barnes was a respected local businessman. He realized his lawyer was right. If he'd go through the trouble of shooting, he might as well have eliminated Barnes, or else this mess would haunt him. Back at South Park, his new home, he parked his truck in the bushes to hide it from the street. He took out his fishing rod, caught some grasshoppers, and snagged 6 small trout from a nearby stream. They were undersized, but he didn't care. "What are they going to do, find me?" he muttered, grilling them over a small fire. Jerry was washing his pan in the stream when his phone rang. "Jerry, hey man, need to talk to you," his old boss said, his tone unexpectedly friendly. Jerry frowned. "What now?" he thought. "Remember that fencing job you set up for Sam Martin in Idaho?" his boss asked. "Yeah," Jerry replied cautiously. "Well, he's got over 4,000 acres, wants fences, 2 barns, and a boundary up to the city limits. Biggest job we've ever had," his boss continued, sounding excited. Jerry's irritation flared. "What's that got to do with me?" "Martin insists on you," his boss explained. "Says he'll hire someone else if you're not in charge." Jerry smirked slightly. "Well, that's nice of him," he said, though he knew he technically wasn't allowed to leave the state. "So, what do you say?" his boss pressed, a note of hope in his voice. Jerry paused, then an idea struck him. "Maybe, what are you offering? How about double commissions?" his boss suggested. "Double?" Jerry repeated, surprised. "Yeah, and back to full-time work," his boss added. "And my salary?" Jerry pushed back. "I didn't even get a chance to explain when I was let go." The boss hesitated, and Jerry could practically hear him calculating. The job would pay 83 cents per half meter for miles of fencing, sheds, and other features, a substantial contract. "All right, agreed," his boss finally conceded. Jerry stopped by the corner store to celebrate with a jar of mixed nuts and a bottle of beer. Beer was off limits, but he didn't care, downing it fast and burying the bottle. At the hearing, the judge gave him a suspicious look, but ultimately granted him permission to cross state lines for work, provided he returned each night. "These charges are serious, Mr. Jacobson. Very serious," the judge said. "But I won't prevent you from working while we await trial. Don't mess this up or you'll be right back in jail. Understood?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jerry managed to say, keeping a straight face. The next day, he set off for Idaho. Sam greeted him warmly with a handshake. Apparently, the news hadn't reached him yet, and Jerry saw no reason to bring it up. "We're planting corn by the creek. South side's got good soil. Need the sheep kept out," Sam said. "Then there's the Angus. They're free range, but with construction popping up, I'm tired of the complaints. We want to keep them on our land." Jerry thought Sam must have a solid fortune by now. By the time they got back to the house, it was nearly 8 p.m., and Jerry knew he had to head back to Oregon by midnight. He hated leaving behind a hot meal and the chance to see Molly, but he had no choice, so he left. Back in Oregon, he called his bail office and got only a voicemail. The next morning, he called as soon as they opened. "You don't have to call every day, just follow the rules, okay?" the person answering snapped. "Understood," Jerry replied, realizing they likely wouldn't be monitoring him unless something triggered their attention. He jumped back into his truck and sped toward the Martin farm. As he pulled up, he noticed Molly sitting on the porch. The moment she saw him, she sprang up, ran inside, and came back moments later, now with a wide-brimmed hat and a basket. She wore cut-off jeans and a t-shirt, her lively steps making it clear she wasn't wearing a bra. "Let's go," she said, climbing into the truck. "Where to?" he asked, starting the engine. "Dad wants me to show you the area by the building site for measurements," she explained. "Everyone else is busy cutting hair today." "Cutting hair?" he repeated, confused. "Yes," she laughed. "The sheep. They'll be at it until dark." It took them over an hour to reach the area. Cattle grazed nearby, unconcerned by their presence. They chatted along the way about all sorts of things, and Jerry couldn't help glancing at her, noticing how her chest moved when they hit bumps. They drove across open fields with only faint ATV tracks as a guide. He thought briefly about how long it had been since he'd been with a woman, but pushed it aside. He was here for work and didn't want to upset her family. They came to a high ridge overlooking a river with a row of 3-story buildings about half a mile away. He noticed a busy highway in the distance. Progress, he thought, noticing the mix of nature and modern development. He saw the problem right away. Grazing animals near a residential area would cause issues. "The fence needs to go about 50 feet from those buildings and run to the city limits. Thankfully, we own the riverbanks on both sides," he said, half to himself and half to Molly. Switching to 4-wheel drive, he drove along the fence line, using the speedometer to calculate distance. Once back at the main house, he sat down to calculate the measurements. This project would take the entire crew weeks to complete. As Jerry finished up, he looked up to see Molly sitting cross-legged nearby, swinging one leg and letting her shoe dangle. "Everyone's still down at the lower barn," Molly said with a grin. "They won't be back for a while. Want to go upstairs?" Jerry felt his face flush at her boldness. I can't," he stammered. "I'm married. Well, we're separated, but I barely know you." Molly glanced at his hand, surprised. "Oh, I didn't know. You're not wearing a ring. Are you getting divorced?" "Most likely. Actually, yeah, I'm certain." Her curiosity was piqued. "So, you didn't get along? What happened?" Jerry hesitated, then admitted, "Well, I shot her." Molly's eyebrows shot up. "You what?" "I shot her and her lover. They were at my house, in my bed." "Oh, I see," Molly replied, clearly taken aback but managing not to look visibly shocked. "I guess I can't blame you. Did they survive?" "Yeah," Jerry replied quietly. "Well, that's something," she said with a small smile. "Sounds like you've got a lot going on." Jerry nodded, deciding to tell her the full story. She listened closely, taking it all in. When he finished, Molly looked thoughtful. "So that's why you had to rush back to Oregon last night?" "Yeah, for the trial. I'll probably end up in prison," he said, looking down. Molly studied him for a moment. "Maybe not," she replied softly. "What if I came with you?" "With me?" Jerry asked, caught off guard. "Yes, to Oregon. I'm not afraid of you, Jerry. You seem like a good man, the only one I've felt this way about. I love it here, but sometimes I feel isolated. Most of the men around here are either too old or already taken." Jerry raised an eyebrow. "And your parents? Wouldn't they be upset if you just—" Molly chuckled. "Dad actually suggested I rope you in. Said you seemed like a good investment. He's never said that about anyone before. When I was dating someone else, he told me the guy wasn't worth it. I don't think he realizes you're still technically married, or he wouldn't have encouraged it. He's a bit old-fashioned." This is unexpected," Jerry said, trying to process her words. "I'm not exactly inexperienced, you know." I've only been with one guy, but I know what I want. And if we're together, I'd never betray you. I know what you're capable of if I did, she added with a playful laugh. Jerry didn't have to think long. What will we tell your parents? He asked. Oh, come on, she said, taking his hand and leading him toward the lower barn. Why explain anything? As they neared, they saw about a dozen men working with the sheep. Mr. Martin looked up, saw them holding hands, and grinned. Dad, Jerry and I are heading out. We'll be back by morning, okay? She called casually. All right, honey. Have fun, he replied with a knowing smile, then turned back to his work. Jerry blinked, still taken aback by her straightforwardness, but Molly just smiled. Dad and Mom are farmers. They know all about life. Zex, love, it's all part of it, she laughed, amused at his reaction. Jerry wasn't sure what to say. He'd never met anyone like her, and she clearly wanted to be with him, without hesitation or judgment. On the way to the motel, Jerry managed to mostly stay within the speed limit, though it was hard with Molly sitting beside him, her shirt slipping off her shoulders. As soon as they hit the open highway, she pulled her t-shirt over her head. His first impression had been right. She was stunning. He even started slowing down, but Molly stopped him. The first time should be in bed. By the time we get there, you'll be ready, she teased, running her hand down his leg. At one point, he asked her to put her shirt back on because he couldn't focus on driving. A trucker noticed her and honked, and she laughed, saying, I'm making his day. Jerry muttered, God help me, under his breath. After a few more miles, he asked her to cover up before she caused an accident, and she obligingly put her shirt back on. They arrived at the motel in record time. When they entered the room, Molly still had her shirt on, but as soon as the door closed, she tossed it aside. Jerry, used to making love with Shelley, found this was different. Molly didn't just want him. She needed him, practically pulling him toward her before he even had his pants off. Her body was slimmer in the waist and hips, with firm, youthful curves, and they spent most of the night exploring each other. Around 11 the next morning, while she was on the phone with her father, Jerry asked, What did he say? He just laughed, she said, crawling back onto the bed. They spent the rest of the day absorbed in each other. By that evening, Jerry realized he was in love with her. He barely knew her, but that didn't matter. He wanted her. Over dinner at a small local cafe, he told her. So you're saying it's just us? She asked, her expression serious. Yes, I want you to be mine, he said, feeling it completely. Wow, she replied, looking shy for the first time. Honestly, I thought you just wanted some fun. Dad thinks you're a good choice. That's how he sees things, she added with a smile. Jerry was a bit surprised, but she laughed it off. You're wonderful. But where will we live? She asked, turning serious again. I don't know, he admitted, realizing he hadn't thought that far ahead. Well, you've got a job and a truck. That's enough to start. Let's just see what happens. If I commit, it'll be forever, she said with a warm smile. Molly, I'm falling in love with you, he told her. Not now, she replied gently but firmly. I like being with you, but I'm not sure yet. Relax, Jerry. For now, no one will touch me but you. And if I decide this isn't for me, you won't touch me again. Deal? Deal, he agreed, his face serious. She was right. They needed time. All right, now let's get back to the motel, she said with a grin. The next day, Jerry finished his measurements and contracts and met with Sam and Dottie to review the plans. They made a few small changes, Sam signed, and shook Jerry's hand. A few minutes later, Molly came out with 2 suitcases. Her parents looked at her in surprise, then at Jerry. I'm going with Jerry, she said firmly. For the first time, Jerry saw the smile disappear from Dottie's face, though she hid it quickly. Sam stood, hugged Molly, and turned to Jerry, his expression more serious than Jerry had ever seen. You've got a lot on your plate, son. You need to settle it, he said firmly. At that moment, Jerry realized Sam knew more than he'd let on. Jerry nodded, taking his words to heart. Molly's not going anywhere, Sam continued. You need to settle things with your wife first. There's no way you two can start a life otherwise. Jerry knew he was right. He saw Molly's shoulders slump. She was so young and impulsive, but her father's wisdom clearly sank in. After dinner, Jerry shook hands with everyone and hugged Molly for a long time. I'll be back as soon as I can, he promised. It's all right, Jerry. I'll wait. I need to know too, she said, tears in her eyes as he climbed into his truck. The drive back felt endless. Jerry didn't want to return now. He knew exactly where he wanted to be. The legal process was dragging on, and there were moments when he almost forgot what he faced. Work didn't fully distract him. On weekends, he made the long drive to see Molly. Sam and Dottie welcomed him, indifferent to the fact that he and Molly retreated to her room for the night. After a few weeks, he felt almost part of the family. He'd even put on some weight, hard to avoid with Dottie's cooking. Every lunch was a feast. He learned that Molly, a quick learner, was becoming a good cook herself. She was also a natural on the ranch. Once he watched her handle a large calf that had injured itself and was panicking. As it thrashed, he grabbed its tail, only to be dragged around while Molly laughed at his clumsy attempts. He managed to slow it down, and Molly ducked under its tail, grabbed its front leg, and used her weight to wrestle it to the ground. She quickly tied its hind legs with rope, and the calf, now subdued, let out a defeated bleat. Then its mother charged toward them, furious. Jerry instinctively prepared to run, but Molly stood her ground, so he stayed too. Molly tossed Jerry a flimsy stick, and he hesitated, wondering what he was supposed to do with it. The cow lowered her head, snorting and kicking up dirt with her hooves. Molly calmly poked her in the face with the stick, stopping her in her tracks. Jerry did the same when the cow turned toward him. Together they drove the cow away, shut the gate, and went back to the calf. Molly expertly stitched up a cut on its shoulder blade. It looked like it had snagged on a wire. She applied some ointment from her ATV and let the calf go. It stood for a moment, head down and mouth drooling. Once they opened the gate, the cow rushed over, immediately starting to nurse her calf. "Well, it'll be fine," Molly said with a grin. "That cow wanted to liquidate me," Jerry muttered. "Yeah, but she was just protecting her calf. Cows are easy to manage. They're actually pretty dumb. It's the sheep that give us all the trouble," she laughed. Jerry had already seen some of the sheep. He inspected a hole in the fence a bit more closely, then widened it just enough for the animals to crawl through. Within moments, the entire flock had slipped to the other side. When he helped herd them back into the pen, there was a chute inside the barn where they lined up for shearing, one by one. As soon as all the sheep were in, Jerry locked the gate. He walked away, but one big sheep came over, inspected the latch, lifted her nose, and tossed it back, swinging the gate wide open. The whole flock streamed out into the open field again. The chaos stirred two border collies into action. They raced out, circled the flock, and froze, staring down the sheep. The flock paused, staring back, until one looked away. Instantly, the sheep turned and shuffled back into the pen. Molly walked over, set the latch, then pulled the chain bolt up and secured it. "They know all the tricks," she laughed. Jerry looked at the two dogs and could have sworn they were giving him a disapproving look. This routine continued for weeks as he traveled to the ranch and helped with various chores. Sam and Dottie kept an eye on him, and he knew it, but he enjoyed the work. For a time, he almost forgot his real-world troubles, immersed in this life so different from his own. Reality hit each time he unlocked the door to his tiny apartment back in town. One day, his phone rang. He was surprised to hear Shelley's voice, since they hadn't been in contact. "How are you, Jerry?" she asked. He assumed she wanted to discuss their divorce, but there wasn't much left to say. She'd already been evicted from their house, which was now on the market. Jerry doubted it would sell quickly, and even if it did, there wasn't much money involved. "I'm fine. What do you want?" he replied. "I just wanted to thank you for not fighting me over alimony," she said. Jerry chuckled to himself. The court had ordered him to pay a hefty sum, and his lawyer had even hinted that it might have been less if he hadn't gone back to work. Shelley had put her job on hold to recover from her injuries, and Jerry knew she was milking it. Still, he'd paid up. He hadn't had a choice. "I also wanted you to know I forgive you," Shelley said suddenly. "What?" Jerry replied, caught off guard. "I forgive you. I know you were angry and didn't mean to hurt me," she continued. Jerry stared at her, incredulous. "You've got to be kidding me." "No, I'm serious," Shelley insisted. "I still love you. I was thinking, maybe we could go out for dinner and talk." Jerry recognized that familiar tone in her voice, a hint of her old persuasion tactics. After a pause, he shook his head. "That's not a good idea." "Of course it is. We can have a nice evening, just like before. I'll even wear something you like, maybe without anything underneath," she added seductively. "I miss you." Shelley's voice took on a sultry tone, clearly intended to provoke him. And it worked. "Shelley, you were the one who cheated on me. I'm not going on a date with you," Jerry snapped. "Oh, don't be like that. I'm just trying to make peace. I told you I forgive you. I know you didn't mean it," she replied. "Mean what? None of this is my fault. Honestly, I should have eliminated you both. And you forgive me?" Jerry's anger finally boiled over. Shelley's tone turned icy. "Art does things to me you couldn't even imagine." Then there was silence on the line, which only made his anger flare hotter. I should just come over and finish this mess, he shouted, seething. Just before the line went dead, he thought he heard a muffled sound in the background. What was that? He wondered, still simmering with rage. A short while later, 3 officers arrived, handcuffed him, and took him back to a cell. The situation felt absurd. His lawyer arrived, looking exasperated. Why did you threaten her? I didn't really threaten her, Jerry protested. She provoked me. She called and said she forgave me, the woman who cheated on me. She's insane. Well, they recorded you threatening her and Barnes, which violates the restraining order, his lawyer said firmly. But she called me, Jerry insisted. They're saying otherwise. They? Jerry's eyes narrowed. You mean Barnes was there too? Apparently, his lawyer confirmed. Jerry sighed, finally realizing that this was exactly the trap they'd set for him. His lawyer played a short recording. It was only Jerry's angry shouting after Shelley's pleasant invitation to dinner. They've edited this, Jerry told his lawyer, feeling despair settle over him. Maybe, but it doesn't look good, the lawyer replied. The old judge looked at Jerry with a scowl before shaking his head. Only a portion of the recording was presented in court. Shelley's voice sounded calm, as if she were genuinely seeking reconciliation, while Jerry's came across as furious and unhinged. This man is a danger to be left free, the prosecutor argued. It's clear this is a setup against my client, Jerry's lawyer countered. He's suffered immensely. His wife cheated on him with Mr. Barnes, and they're using this against him out of spite. But your client made the threat, the judge responded simply, and there's no proof of an affair either. Jerry was back in a cell. Days turned into weeks, then a month. His lawyer visited a few times to provide updates. Then one day, a young woman introduced herself as Carrie Anderson, a lawyer. I don't think I can afford another attorney, Jerry said, defeated. Lucky for you, you have friends. I'm taking this on pro bono, and there's a team helping, she said with a smile. Friends? Jerry asked, confused. Yes, Sam Martin and his wife. Oh, and a message for you. A good breeding bull, she added, amused. Jerry chuckled, finally understanding. Art Barnes might have power in his town, but he couldn't control everyone. Soon, they gathered hard proof that the tape had been altered. Tracing Jerry's cell records showed that the call had come from Art Barnes's office. Just 3 days later, Jerry was released on bail. The first thing he did was pick up his truck and head to Idaho. Molly ran to him, nearly knocking him over with a hug. Sam and Dottie stood on the porch, smiling. Thank you both. But why did you do this for me? He asked. Not for you, Molly, Sam grinned. That night, Jerry told them the whole story, something he hadn't done before, though Molly already knew bits and pieces. As they listened, Jerry felt a peace settle over him. That night, lying beside Molly, holding her close, he felt at home. I'm ready, she whispered. Jerry smiled, knowing Molly was truly his. A month later, the trial began. The judge was different, older, but just as stern. Things went as Jerry expected. Both Barnes and Shelley testified that they'd been having a routine business meeting, with Shelley stepping into her private bathroom to freshen up after a long day. They claimed Jerry stormed in and started shooting, but Jerry's team pointed out that this took place at 2 a.m. in Shelley's bedroom. The prosecution even showed a diagram with Barnes sitting on the bed, reading. Jerry's team argued that, as far as Jerry knew, Barnes could have been a robber or even a carnivore. The jury exchanged glances. When Shelley testified again, she continued to deny any affair. Then photos surfaced showing her and Barnes in compromising situations. Jerry had seen these pictures before, taken by a reputable detective after both had left the hospital. In the images, Barnes, who had been shot in the groin, seemed to be recovering quite well. Shelley's composure shattered as the photos were displayed. Art Barnes's wife stood up yelling, "You fool!" before storming out, leaving Barnes looking miserable. Objection! The prosecution tried, but the judge remained indifferent. More photos displayed the crime scene. The disheveled bed, a magazine lying next to Shelley. During a break, Carrie leaned in and confided to Jerry that the case was nearly wrapped up, except for one sticking point. What's that? Jerry asked quietly. You shot your wife, Carrie replied. Barnes was self-defense, but shooting her is harder to justify. So, what's the plan? We could argue it was a crime of passion, an uncontrollable fit of rage, but temporary insanity isn't an option at this point. Jerry considered this. What if I just tell the truth? Carrie raised an eyebrow. And what would you say? She drove me crazy, he admitted. That could lead to an attack charge, Carrie warned. You understand that? Yes, Jerry replied firmly. But it's the truth. When the verdict was read, the foreman announced, "Not guilty on the first charge. Guilty." The courtroom fell silent as Jerry noticed Barnes and Shelley's absence. The judge sighed, looking at him. "Son, you can't just go around shooting people, no matter how justified you feel," he said, shaking his head. "At least no one died. That's something." Laughter rippled through the room. "Order," the judge said, banging his gavel. 5 years with time served and probation." He stood, leaving without a glance back. Jerry hugged Carrie and looked over to see Molly, smiling through her tears. Outside, the sun was shining as he walked out, hand in hand with her. A few days later, at the final divorce hearing, Shelley was absent, and her alimony claim was dropped. As they left, the sun was shining brightly. Driving back to Idaho in his big Dodge, Molly leaned back, her blouse unbuttoned, soaking up the morning light. "There's a truck nearby," Jerry warned, glancing over his shoulder. "I don't care. Let him look if he wants to," Molly laughed, enjoying the sunshine. "You don't mind, do you?" They continued driving, a long incline gradually blocking the trucker's view. "So what about a wedding?" Molly asked suddenly. Jerry shrugged. "I don't mind. Do you want to?" "Of course I do," she teased. "Besides, you should want it too." "Oh yeah? And why's that?" "We didn't exactly use any protection," she replied with a mischievous grin. Jerry's eyes widened. "Wait, is that what you meant when you said you were ready?" "Yes, that's what I meant," she replied, laughing. "Any objections?" "My dad has a tool, you know," she joked, her eyes sparkling. "He won't need it," Jerry said, grinning back. When they returned to the ranch, Molly turned to him. "Let's head down to the stream." "What for?" he asked, curious. "So I can give you a proper homecoming," she winked. Sam and Dottie waved as they headed down the hill toward the creek. By the grassy bank, she slipped out of her clothes, and they shared a tender embrace, listening to the birds and the gentle flow of the stream. As they lay together, they heard a distant bull's bellow. Jerry tilted his head back and mimicked the sound. Molly laughed. "You've got a lot of practice to do." "Maybe somewhere else?" he asked, smiling. "You're perfect," she whispered. Laughing, they dressed and walked back to the house. For the first time, Jerry felt he was truly home. Jerry Jacobson's life took on a slower, steadier rhythm at the Martin Ranch. In the months following his trial, he fully immersed himself in the work and routine of ranch life. The vast Idaho fields provided him with an unexpected kind of peace, a sanctuary of open skies and winding creeks, far from the troubles he left behind. Each morning he rose before dawn, feeling the cool, crisp air as he worked alongside Sam and the others. The work was hard but satisfying, his hands shaping new fences, corrals, and sheds, as if each hammer's strike was building the life he'd long sought but never truly found. Molly was always by his side. Over time, her gentle humor and unwavering support reminded him of what it meant to share life with someone who was his equal in spirit. Her laughter, ringing across the fields, was often the last sound he heard before he closed his eyes each night. Together, they developed a rhythm. Mornings filled with work, afternoons with laughter, and evenings often spent stargazing, wrapped in each other's embrace. The small shared moments became a reminder that love didn't have to be a storm of intensity. It could be the gentle presence of someone who stood by you, even when life went sideways. Jerry was learning that love wasn't always flashy or new, but something that settled into your bones and made you feel whole. Eventually, the memory of his past life faded, replaced by the countless tasks and simple pleasures of ranch work. But Jerry kept close to Sam's words, "Take care of what's real." That became his new motto. He learned to let go of the bitterness that once consumed him, and with Molly's steadfast presence, he found a sense of peace that had once seemed unreachable. One autumn evening, as they were bringing in the last of the cattle, Molly turned to him, her eyes bright with excitement. "Do you ever think we'll have our own ranch, Jerry?" she asked, her voice soft but full of hope. Jerry paused, considering the life they were building together. "I think we will," he replied, smiling at her. "One day we'll make our own little piece of paradise." He looked at her, feeling the warmth of a promise that needed no words. As the years passed, Jerry's life with Molly blossomed in unexpected ways. The Jacobsons became a beloved part of the community, known for their hospitality, resilience, and commitment to family and friends. And though Jerry's journey had been marked by hardship, he now knew that he had found his way home. In the quiet moments, he would sometimes think back to the man he once was, the anger and suspicion that had fueled his actions, and he felt grateful that he had left that man behind. The future stretched out before him, as open as the Idaho skies, filled with endless possibilities. A future shaped by the work of his hands, the strength of his heart, and the enduring love that had, against all odds, given him a second chance.